Cool. All right, like I said, we're talking about collections tonight. Glad to have you all here. Now, tonight I'm talking about collections, what to do, and what not to do. Now, collections are one of the most misunderstood parts of repairing credit, and that confusion costs people a lot of money, stress, and sometimes lawsuits. And tonight, I'm going to be teaching a simple system so that way when you see a collection, you know exactly what to do. How many of us have ever felt stuck when we get collections? We feel defeated. We just don't know what to do. Whether we know that money was owed in the past to that original creditor, and then they ended up selling it to a collection company, and then it hit your credit report, and then it dropped your credit score, and you just were stuck. You didn't know what to do. There's a lot of advice online. There's a lot of advice on Instagram and TikTok on do this, do that. You can't really decipher what's true or not. My job tonight is to make sure that I explain this very clearly and easily, so then that way you know how to go about collections and how to deal with them. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So when it comes to collections, I have a very simple method and framework on how to deal with them. And it's called my C.L.E.A.R method. You see, I have it written right here on the board. And I'm going to break down exactly what that means, because every collection, whether it's medical or whether it's non-medical, should be handled in the same order. And I'm going to show you 5 steps on how. And if you skip a step, you're going to waste a lot of time or even make it a lot worse for yourself. And this is going to keep you calm and organized throughout this whole process. I'm going to streamline it for you. Sorry. So as we're talking today, be sure to ask your questions. I will be interactive with the chat, whether we're on YouTube or here on TikTok. I will be answering questions live. So if you have those questions, drop them, and I'm going to be sure to address them as we go through this. So as I mentioned, I have my C.L.E.A.R framework. So I want to go through one by one, step by step. Like I said, we have 5 steps on how we need to handle collections, and we need to handle it in these exact orders. So for step 1, which is the C, and we're going to use 2 different colors here, so that way we can decipher. And also, let me make sure on TikTok, because it's probably backwards for you. So we're going to turn the mirroring off. And then if you're on TikTok, let me know now if this is facing the right way, because I think it was mirroring for you. Now, when it comes to this C.L.E.A.R method, the C stands for classify the collector. So classify the collector. All right. Step 2. The L stands for lock the timeline. And I'm going to explain all of these as we go through tonight. And it's all going to make sense. We're going to lock the timeline. 3. The E stands for establish proof. Establish proof. All right. Number 4. The A stands for audit the credit report. We want to audit the credit report. And then lastly, sorry, it's kind of hard going through multiple markers. I'm going to try to make this work. The R, ready? Stands for respond quickly. or correctly. I'm sorry, not quickly. Respond correctly. So those are the 5 steps that I'm going to take you through tonight. And like I said, we're going to go through these one by one. We have 5 steps that we're going to go through. So then that way we can make this process simple when it comes to potentially either removing these collections on your credit report or handling them an alternative way, because we just want to get to the goal. Whether we want to buy a new home, whether we want to get into a new car, or you might have a business and you're trying to get some business funding, but we have to get these collections and unpaid debts handled on our credit report. So we're going to lock in and talk about each of those. So for step 1, we're going to talk about classifying the collector first. All right, we're going to talk about this one first, classifying the collector. And I'm going to talk about what that means throughout this process. So first, we need to define what a collection actually means. What a collection actually means. A collection means that the original bill went unpaid long enough that a new company is now involved with that debt, or the original creditor moved it to collections. Now, this is important to clarify because the rules and rights can change depending on who is actually collecting on your debt. The rules and your rights can change depending on who is collecting on your debt. So let's talk about who can actually collect on your debt. Now, there are 3 different types of collectors, just 3, and they are not all the same. There's 3 different types of collectors, and they're not the same. So I'm going to go over all 3 types of collectors. So first, there is the original creditor. All right. The first type of collectors is the original creditor. The original creditor is simply defined as the company that you first borrowed from. Very simple. So whether it was a credit card, whether it was a car loan, whether it was student loans, whether it was a personal loan, this is the person that you first borrowed from, the person that you filled out that application for. They let you borrow money. They let you borrow a line of credit. That is who the original creditor is. Now, the second type of collector is a collection agency. A collection agency. Now, the collection agency is simply a company collecting for the original creditor. All they're doing is collecting for the original creditor. So they may not even fully own the debt, but the original creditor hired the collection agency to collect on their behalf. So that is the definition of a collection agency. Now, the third type of collector is a debt buyer. And these are very important to understand. The third type of collector is a debt buyer. It's someone who owns the debt. A company that bought the debt and now owns it. And these companies typically buy your debt for pennies on the dollar. So they may buy the debt for 25 cents per every dollar that is owed, if that makes sense, right? So say if the debt was $1, they might buy the debt for 25 cents. And then they're going to try to collect on the full amount of that. Now, knowing these 3 types is very important because it's going to determine how we're going to go about this process. And we need to understand who is actually collecting. Now, let's talk about why this step comes first. It's because if you do not know who you're dealing with, you do not know the leverage that you have. And different collectors have different records, different incentives, and different proof that they can access. That's very important to know. Different collectors have different records, different incentives, and different proof that they can access. And that matters when it comes to disputing these type of things on our credit report, because we need to be knowing what to ask for, what we can legally ask for, what these companies should legally provide, or if they're just trying to get over on us and try to trick us through this process. That's why we need to know these different type of collectors. Now, let's talk about the L in C.L.E.A.R. So after we've classified the collector, so once we figured out, okay, we decided, okay, with this debt that's being collected, is it being collected by the original creditor? Is it being collected by the collection agency? Or is it trying to be collected by a debt buyer? We then need to lock in the timeline. We next need to lock in the timeline. All right. Collection timelines are very important to know. And we don't want to mix them up, right? Like, we need to know our rules and rights when it comes to these collections that we have on our credit report. So there's 3 different timelines when it comes to collections on your report. The first timeline is how long this account actually can stay on our credit report. Any negative item or any account in general, or let me say, any negative item, let's just stick with, let's stay focused. Any negative item, such as, say, a collection, should only stay on your credit report for 7 years. Okay? The next timeline we need to know is how long can these original creditors, collection agencies, debt buyers, how long do they have before they can actually sue us? Like, what is the timeline to where this debt can still be suable to us? We need to know that information. The next timeline that we need to understand is how long they can keep trying to collect this debt. Because you'll find out, especially with some of these debts and collections, like, they'll keep trying to re-age this debt, so then that way they can keep trying to collect on it and harass you. We need to know that information. And don't mix these timelines up. Now, as I mentioned with the first timeline, that most negative items fall off around 7 years from the first delinquency that led to the collection. Not from the day the collector opened it, also not from the day that it was actually sold to a debt buyer. 7 years from the first delinquency that led to the collection. So this is something that you can easily go and look on your credit report and figure out when was the first delinquency on this account. And that's going to give you the answers that you need to know on when this will potentially fall off of the report. All right? Easy. Now, the next timeline is the lawsuit risk, right? As I mentioned, how long can these, what is the time period that, say if you have a $10,000 collection on your credit report, how long do these companies have until they can actually sue you? Because that happens all the time. I just had a client that hit me up 2 days ago. Now, when they first started my program, granted, I told them, like, yes, we're going to dispute the inaccuracies on these accounts, but this person had like a $30,000 debt on their credit report. So immediately, if I ever see that on a credit report and someone comes to me and they're like, hey, I want to get this removed from the report, I'm first going to say, hey, like, the only way we can get this removed is if there's inaccuracies. And if there's inaccuracies, we definitely can dispute the inaccuracies. But just know, with the debt up to, say, $30,000, or even I've seen people get sued for $6,000, they can try to come after you, because once we send these disputes, that's going to trigger that. Now, not all collection companies, not all creditors take that next measure, but for a big debt, say 20, 30 grand, you can probably bet they're going to try to come after you for that. And I'm going to talk about how we handle that a little bit further in this training, because it's very important to know. It's nothing to freak out about. It's nothing to freak out about at all. It's a very simple process on how to take the next steps for that. But it's important to be aware, so then that way you know what to do, and that way we don't stay confused. All right. Now, in terms of the timeline for a company like that to be able to attempt to sue you, you need to know the statute of limitations in your state. You need to know the statute of limitations in your state. So for me, I'm in Indiana right now. The statute of limitations is 6 years. So let's just say hypothetically, I have a debt on my credit report, say $8,000. They have 6 years to be able to sue for that debt. Anything after 6 years, they can't try to legally come and collect on that anymore. And one thing that I see often, especially with different debts and whatnot, these companies literally wait until about the 5 year mark, right before they get to that 6 years, and then sometimes they send those lawsuits in the mail, or they try to serve people with these lawsuits. They wait to the very last minute because that's their last shot of getting that debt. That's their last shot of collecting on that money. Now, in order to figure out the statute of limitations in your state, just look it up. It's a simple Google search. Everyone has Google. Just type in statute of limitations in Indiana, statute of limitations in Ohio, statute of limitations in California, and figure that out. And then go and look at that account and figure out, okay, where are we on this timeline? Where are we on this timeline? So then that way, that gives you more reassurance. So then that way you can know what to expect. So we talked about classifying the collector. So is this a original creditor that's trying to collect? Is it a collection agency trying to collect? Or is it a debt buyer trying to collect? We then talked about locking in the timeline. So I'm looking at this account, figuring out, okay, when does this actually fall off my credit report? And then also, how much longer until they cannot legally try to sue me for this debt? Those are in timelines that you need to understand, and that's going to set the standard of what you need to do moving forward. It's going to set the process of what you need to do moving forward to handle this. So next, we're going to talk about establishing proof for this debt. And this is where it starts to get fun. This is my favorite part in the process, is establishing the proof of the debt, aka debt validation. This is where it gets fun. Now, I'm going to talk about what debt validation is, but I'm also going to talk about what it isn't, because we need to understand and have a simple understanding of what it is. Now, debt validation is simply saying, show me you have the right person, show me you have the right amount listed for this debt, and show me that you have the right authority to collect on this debt. That's it. Simple. Requesting debt validation is asking them to show me you have the right person, the right amount, and the authority to collect on this debt. Now, you're probably asking, how do we request validation of a debt the right way? Let's do it the right way. I like doing things the right way, because if you do it right once, you don't have to do it again. Now, with debt validation, it's simply how you ask a creditor, how you ask a collection. Debt validation is how you ask a collector to prove that the debt belongs to you, that they have the right amount, and they have the right to collect. It's used to get clarity, create a paper trail, which is very important when it comes to just disputing things in general, but also to protect your rights. Like, there's nothing wrong with these companies trying to collect on these debts. Like, let's be honest, like, you were just irresponsible and you didn't pay the debt, okay? So they have their rights, but you also have yours. Like, we don't need them harassing us. We don't need them just doing unlawful things to try to collect on these debts and annoying us. Like, that's one of the main things that I hear with these collectors. Like, they're annoying, they harass you, but we need to know our rights, because if we do handle this, if we do want to pay this, we want to make sure that it's being done correctly all the way across the board, on their end and on our end. We do not want to get taken advantage of. Very important. So When it comes to debt validation, one of the first things, if you have a collection in your credit report, is, or even before it hits the report, but you know that you're getting notices and phone calls and things like that for this debt, is that you want to request validation through a letter. And this is the first step that I take with all my clients that have collections, is we always send a debt validation letter. Now, a must-have when you're sending this debt validation letter is you must identify the account, you must state that you're disputing the debt, you need to request validation in writing, and it needs to be sent within 30 days of first notice. That's best practice, right? So with that one in particular, you probably, even before the account got hit on your credit report, they might have sent you something in the mail saying, hey, we are a debt buyer trying to collect on this debt from so-and-so. Here's the amount. If you do not agree with this, please respond to this within 30 days of this notice. That's basically what that is. And that's immediately when you want to send that debt validation letter. Now, when you're writing your debt validation letter, these are the non-negotiables that you must have within that letter to make it a proper debt validation request, okay? You want to include your full name and your mailing address. You want to include the collector's name and their mailing address. You want to include the account and the reference number. You want a clear statement disputing the debt. It doesn't have to be fancy. You just want a very clear statement that you're disputing the debt. You want to request validation under federal law. You want to request that the collection stop until validation. So when you send this letter out, you must clearly state that they must not contact you. Do not contact me until you validate this. And then you want to request that the credit reporting be paused or marked as disputed on your credit report. And that's something that these companies sometimes do not do, specifically marking it as disputed. Like when you send this debt validation letter out, from the time they get it, let's stick on a 30-day timeline. When you update your report again in 30 days, on these collection accounts, it must say disputed. If it doesn't, that's a violation. Okay? Now, also within this letter, do not admit to the debt. You're simply just saying, you're including all that information that I just said, but you're simply just saying, I noticed this on my credit report. Can you please provide proof that I owe this? I just want some proof. I'm not saying I don't want to pay it. I'm not saying, you're really not saying it's yours, but you're just saying, can you prove this? I noticed this on my report. I don't know where it's coming from. And do not agree to pay in that letter. We're putting the burden of proof on them. They need to do their job. They want to collect, so they have to do their job. Now, when sending and disputing collections, you probably hear a line that says you can get collections removed because they don't have a signed contract and they need to provide a signed contract and all these different things. They actually don't have to provide a signed contract. Like people say things like, I never did business with these people. I don't have a signed contract. They don't need that for proper validation. They don't actually need that. Look it up. People just say anything online. Okay? And if you really think about it, a lot of different debts that you have, you never even signed a contract. Think about medical bills, utilities, credit cards. You don't have any signatures. So why would you request that from them and you've never even had a signature for that? Okay? Debt validation is just simply basic proof that connects. All they need is basic proof that connects the debt to you and explains the amount for it. And if it's a debt buyer, they need the chain of assignment. That's really all they got to prove. So when you're sending out these letters, these companies may go silent on you. They may go silent. You may not hear from them, then you got to follow up with them. Now, if you requested validation in the allowed window, they don't necessarily have to provide it, but they generally must stop collection efforts until they do. Now, that doesn't automatically delete it from your credit report, but it can create leverage and expose their sloppy files on the back end. All right? If they do not provide that validation after sending that letter, they're kind of probably just like, we don't have this information that they're looking for, and they're trying to delay the process. But until they provide that validation, they must stop collection activity until it is validated. So we're getting through this. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody? Let's check the chat. Let's see. No questions in the chat, because I'm flying through this right now, actually. Flying through this pretty fast. All right, so no questions. Cool, we'll keep going. So we talked about classifying the collector, locking in a timeline, establishing proof. Now we're going to talk about auditing the credit report. Because sometimes when we send these debt validation letters, that does not magically mean that these collections are going to fall off. It does happen sometimes. I just had a client that started with me 30 days ago. All I did for a collection, it was the original creditor was Sprint. It was a Jefferson Capital collection. It was for a little over $4,000. We sent the simple debt validation letter, and it got removed from the credit report in 30 days. A little over $4,000. Like, that's amazing. It happens like that sometimes. It can happen like that sometimes, depending on the collection company or the debt buyer. But sometimes it's not that easy. So what do we do if it's not that easy? We want to audit the credit report, because the only way that we can get collections removed from the credit report when disputing outside of the debt validation is to dispute the inaccuracies of the reporting. And this is one of my favorite parts, like establishing the proof and auditing the credit report. That's where all the magic happens when it comes to collections. That's where all the magic happens. So let's talk about auditing your credit report. And this personally is where a lot of my deletions come from with my clients. It's sending out these dispute letters, pointing out the errors, questioning the errors, and because they cannot provide information and accurate reporting, they have to remove these things from the credit report. Most removals come from inaccurate reporting. So when it comes to disputing the inaccurate reporting, that can include things like the name, dates, date of first delinquency. That could be the payment history. That could be the status. All these things are things that I'm looking at on the credit report. So a lot of the times, let's just say for certain collections, I'll send out a debt validation letter month 1. They don't change anything. They may send something, a vague response in the mail with a simple 1-page statement of the account. There's still inaccuracies in the reporting. So what I do is I'll gather up the responses that they send to try to prove and validate the debt, but we'll also go to the credit report to find some inaccuracies. An inaccuracy that I see all the time, which you can probably find on your own credit report. But first, let's talk about this. Get access to your credit report. Just go to annualcreditreport.com. This is something that you can do tonight. This is something that you can do tonight. Go get access to your free credit reports from annualcreditreport.com and pull up each credit bureau's report and compare the collections that's being listed. Now, one of the most common inaccuracies that I see for an account is that, say, TransUnion and Equifax may say that the account is listed as open, but Experian says that the account is listed as closed. That's one error. So circle that error. Another inaccuracy that I see is, say, TransUnion has no payment history listed at all. But for Equifax, for a collection, it's listed as 100% payment history. It's saying that you had on-time payments for the last 2 years. But if you go to Experian, it's saying that every single month is listed as collection charge-off. Those are plenty of inaccuracies, so circle those. Now, when you're following up and disputing these inaccuracies, you want to basically say, so let's just say you sent the debt validation letter out, they sent a vague response. One thing that I like to do is acknowledge that I received the response. So I'll say, hey, thank you for sending that response in. This still isn't good enough for me. But also, while we're here, there's this error in the reporting, there's this error, this error. How can these things be true? So let's just say if we have the status of the accounts being listed as open and closed across the bureaus, I'll say, okay, TransUnion and Equifax says that these accounts are open, but Experian says that this account is closed. How can that be possible? How can those two things be true? Question mark, period. I'm just pointing out a mistake, and now it's their job to make sure there's accurate reporting. And if they cannot provide that proof, then they must remove it from the credit report. And that's how I get a lot of deletions on different collection accounts for my clients. That simple method right there. It doesn't have to be fancy. Simple. I like simple. There's no secret law or secret letter that's going to get these things removed. It's pointing out mistakes and questioning the mistakes and making them do their job. All right. So I also want to talk about medical debts. Man, I wish. So I got excited in the beginning of 2025 because right before the presidential administration's change, they were actually going to remove medical debts from all credit reports, no matter the amounts. They were going to do that. And then once the administrations changed, they put a pause to that because they was going through the things with the CFPB and all these people. And now they got halted. Now medical debts will affect people in their credit worthiness still. All right. But there has been a lot of recent changes in the past year. So for example, the major credit bureaus added a waiting period before medical debts can actually appear on the credit report. So you actually have 365 days before a medical debt can actually show up on your credit report, which is great because that gives you a lot of leeway. So there's really no excuse to ignore the debt. So my recommendation, if you get that notice in the mail for that medical debt, just get on a payment plan just to avoid that even getting on your credit report. Now, if the debt is $500 or less, it's not going to show up on your credit report. If you have a collection, if you have a medical debt that's in a collection, $500 or less, it won't show up on your credit report. Now, if it's $500 or more, it's going on your credit report after that 365-day notice of letting you know you owe this debt. Now, the good thing is, though, is that with medical collections, once you pay them, the account fully gets removed from your credit report. That's the good thing. But those are the rules now. Like, I wish they just were never on the credit report. I personally feel like that, especially with the lack of health care and things like that, I personally feel like your medical bills and stuff should not affect you being able to get into a new car, a new home, being able to do the things that you need to do on a daily basis with your life. But that's just the way the game works. So that's why we need to understand the rules and the perimeters, so then that way we can be educated and not be in the know. Okay. Now with non-medical debts, they don't get those same protections and whatnot. So once you get that notice for that debt, you don't respond in that 30 days to that notice, they're hitting your credit report with that. It could be, I've seen collections on credit reports for like $23, and I'm like, that is crazy. They don't care what the amount is at all. Now, so after we've audited the credit report, we pointed out those mistakes, we questioned those mistakes, we sent down our dispute letters. Lastly, we just want to respond correctly. That's the last step. We want to respond correctly. Like I said, we want to do things the right way the first time. Now, there's 4 different paths when it comes to responding. So once you know who it is, what the dates are, what the proof is that they provide, now you have real options on what you should do next. You can either dispute the inaccuracies, you can either try to negotiate to get the debt paid for lesser than the amount, but make sure that you get that in writing, okay? Or you can pay it strategically if that fits your goals. Because that happens. I'm not one of those people that's saying never pay a collection. Because sometimes paying that collection can get you in your new home. I deal with a lot of first-time home buyers, people that are looking to get their credit improved. And sometimes we're strategic about paying different collections because sometimes all they need to do is pay that debt to get into a new home. So instead of just going through the ringer, keep disputing and getting nowhere and spinning ourselves in a hamster wheel, just pay the debt so you can get into your new home for your new family. All right? Everybody's situation is different. Everyone's goal is different. Yes, we necessarily do not want to pay it because it still might be on the credit report. But again, if that's all it takes to get into a new home and you're on a timeline, pay the debt. And lastly, you can also prepare for escalation. So say if they decide to escalate things on their end, whether it's the debt buyer or whether it's the collection company, you know how to take legal action. You know how to go about that process. But that's, what we're going to talk about a little bit here in the next few minutes. So what happens if these debt buyers or these collection companies threaten you to go to court? Now, I want to make this clear. A phone call is not a lawsuit. They also can't necessarily threaten you and say they're going to sue you. Like, they can't do that. A letter in the mail threatening to take legal action is still not the same as official court papers. So you know it's real when you get those official court papers, when they send you that case number. When you go to my case and you put in that case number and it's there, that's when it gets real. Now, if you get real court papers, ignoring them is the worst thing that you can do. Right? Ignoring them is the worst thing that you can do. And that's why I'm going over this information tonight, because I want you to be educated and not dig yourself in a deeper hole. Please do not ignore it, because that's actually what they're hoping that you do. They're hoping that you ignore this. Now, I am not an attorney, but the general rule is if you get served court papers, is that either you respond, you show up, or you get defaulted. So when it comes to you respond, if you get court papers, a lot of the times you can just go to that company or go to the attorney that's trying to collect that debt on their behalf and figure out some type of payment plan to get that handled. That way you don't got to go to court. That's one way. Or you can go to court and try to fight it. You can also do that. Find you an expert attorney, find you a consumer law attorney, find you someone that can represent you. You can also go that way and try to fight it, especially if you genuinely feel like you've been done wronged. Or if you do nothing at all, the debt will get defaulted. And then they can try to garnish your wages and take more money from you out your paycheck that you probably don't even have right now. Okay? So those are your options. It's important to know that. It doesn't have to be that scary. Like I said, if you get served, just get in contact with them immediately or show up to court. Or if you do nothing, you'll get defaulted. So that's all we got tonight. Do we have any questions in particular before I go over and recap what we talked about? All right. Like I said, we have the C.L.E.A.R method. It's very simple. We want to do these things step by step. we want to first classify the collector. So the person collecting this debt, is it the original creditor? Is it a collection agency? Or is it a debt buyer? Step 2 is we want to lock in the timeline. So we need to understand our timeline. When does this account fall off of my credit report? And also, is this debt still within the statute of limitations? And can they still sue me for this debt? Because that's going to determine a lot of what you do. Third is you want to establish proof. You want to send that debt validation letter. You want to request proof that they can actually collect on this debt and that it actually is yours. Because even if you're just like, you want to pay the debt, you don't want to dish out money to someone who doesn't even actually have all the proof they need to be able to collect on that debt. Fourth is you want to audit the credit report. So after that debt validation, if they don't remove it, then we want to go to the credit report and dispute these inaccuracies. We want to compare our reports from annualcreditreport.com, circle the inaccuracies, question the inaccuracies, dispute the inaccuracies, and work to get those accounts removed if we can. And then lastly, we want to respond correctly. We need to know how to respond. We need to know what steps to take next, and we want to respond swiftly. Okay? So, was that simple enough? For those of you who tuned in, let me know in the chat right now, like, was that simple enough? Do you feel like you have a better understanding of collections, what to do, what not to do, what it truly means? And as I go through more lives and as I show up week to week, we can dive a little bit deeper. And if there's something very specific that you want to know, drop it in the chat. Perfect. Very detailed. Appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in. And if there's something that you truly want to know or understand, we can dive a little bit deeper. All right. I'm going to give you very simple, clear information. That way you can take action. Because when we get confused on things, when we don't know what to do and we get scared, a lot of the times we do nothing. And doing nothing is not the answer. So with that, I appreciate all of you for hopping on. I will be back tomorrow. I have not decided what I'm going to talk about yet, but I'm going to be here with myself, my whiteboard, you guys, and I appreciate y'all. Have a good